So let's go to an owner's perspective, right? Because for the most part, David, when these negotiations have been talked about, the only side we heard from is the players, whether it's Tony Clark, or it's actual players speaking out about their frustrations. Tom Ricketts, the Cubs owner, spoke with ESPN, and he was the first owner, at least I know of, that spoke on the record and heard about it. And at least some of the quotes that he said, I want to get kind of run by you, because he claims at least after expenses are paid, the rest of the money goes to the GM for the team to spend. So I'm curious, when you were at the Marlins at Jeffrey Loria, was this the case? Was all the money after the expenses were taken out put back into the team for salary or payroll or bonuses or stuff like that? Or is more money pocketed than maybe Tom Ricketts is trying to lead on to?
Yeah, Jeffrey never got a distribution. There were a couple of years that the team was profitable and took that extra money at the end in order to pay down debt, so then we could incur more debt when we participated in the building of Marlins Park. So there were no payments made. I can't speak to whether Tom Ricketts gets distributions or not, but what I can tell you is that I think it's probably very, very unlikely. Owners, while they are wealthy, and billionaires in some cases, millionaires in all cases, the fact is that my analogy that I've been telling people, trying to get them to understand from an owner's perspective, when an owner owns 5 businesses, and 4 businesses are profitable and 1 is not, it is not the responsibility of that owner to take money from the winning businesses and fund a losing business. In the real world, that losing business would fold, and that they would say, okay, we're going to stick with our 4 winning businesses, like anybody would do. If you own 3 restaurant locations and 2 make it and 1 does not, you don't take the profit from the 2 which are making it and put it into the 3rd. You say, wait a minute, I guess that was a bad location. I guess we overextended ourselves, so we're going to go back to 2 locations. And I'm not saying that teams are going to be contracted. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that to make an owner, or to think that an owner is responsible to take profits from outside businesses and fund losses of their team, I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. And in terms of the Cubs saying that teams don't hoard loads of cash, I talked about it on yesterday's Nothing Personal. It's not like Tom Ricketts has $200 million that he keeps in his mattress that he's hoarding for a rainy day, and that he's going to just take it out now and start pouring it into the team. That's not reasonable, nor is it accurate. I just don't think, by the way, the timing of what he said is smart. I don't think he should be talking. I think baseball has been really smart, where the only person talking is Manfred and the commissioner. And, baseball has a hard time on the player side because so many players, whether it's Trevor Bauer or Max Scherzer or an agent like a Scott Boras, so many people are talking that it really doesn't elicit any sort of public support.
So yeah, I'm curious. I just want to go back to the analogy you made. Like you said, right? If you have 5 businesses, 4 are good and 1 is failing, you cut bait, cut your losses, and you keep the 4 that are successful. So I'm curious, and then obviously this instance is very different. Like you said before, it's something we've never seen before, and really anything with with the global, I should say, pandemic. So I'm curious. Before this pandemic struck, obviously baseball is one of the most profitable leagues in the country. They brought in $10.7 billion of revenue last year. So I'm curious. So this is not like owners have been struggling in the past. I mean, 29 of the 30 teams are valued over $1 billion. And for the most part, revenues each year for 17 straight years have continued to increase. So is it, I guess from my perspective as a fan, is it selfish to kind of put this on the owners to shoulder a 1-year loss, realizing that if they play baseball in 2020, they have a chance to grow the game, reach audiences they never have before, and at least not get fans upset like they did in 1994? It would be smarter for them to take a short-term loss, take it, sink this year, realizing next year and the years following, when TV deals get redone and when the economy gets back, that they will make maybe even more revenue than they would have in a normal season. Am I putting too much pressure on the owners to kind of shoulder a loss for 1 year in order to gain in the future?
So it's not pressure, right? The question is, though, you just made a few assumptions that may or may not be true. So let's talk about revenue. You can't say that because revenue increases in your business that all of a sudden that means that your profit and operating profit increases. If your expenses go up more than your revenues, your overall expenses, then it doesn't matter that your revenues are going up, but your losses are going up too. So it is not true that 30 teams or 29 teams are profitable on an annual basis. That is on a cash basis. That is not true, and I know it for a fact.
So I didn't mean. I apologize. I may have misspoke. I meant valued over $1 billion. I apologize. I didn't mean to mean that they were profiting.
No, you said both.
Oh,
but Ryan,
I apologize. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just teaching our audience about revenue does not equal profit. And so just because revenue's gone up doesn't mean profit has. Then you mentioned a Forbes article where 29 of 30 teams are valued over $1 billion. Owners would look at those Forbes valuations and laugh because they're not based on reality. What a baseball team is worth is like what any business is worth, what someone else is willing to pay for it. Unless you're a publicly traded company, in which case you know exactly the value of your company because you multiply the share price times the number of shares and you subtract the debt, and that's what your business is worth. In baseball, just because Forbes says your team is worth $5 billion, that doesn't mean that the Steinbrenner family gets to walk around and saying, hey, I've got $5 billion quartered away. I've got an asset worth $5 billion. Well, until I have someone who's willing to buy it from me for $5 billion, that's when I know what the team is worth. But by the way, I then have to subtract all the money I owe to the banks for buying the team or for running the team or for buying a network or running a network or building a stadium, whatever the expenses are or debt is. Then you know what your net valuation is. What Forbes gives you is what's called an enterprise valuation, which does not take into account debt. So it's not meaningful to owners when they see the Forbes valuations. You don't heat your house with those valuations.
All right, David. So that's a great point. So I want to finish off on this then. If this, if owners are out there saying we're operating at a loss this year, and players are asking them, show us the books, we want to see it's true. How come they're not like? I'm not saying I don't believe you. Trust me, because I'm more frustrated because there's really a lack of knowledge, and like you said, Forbes is not partially their valuations because we don't know truly what the revenues are, what the expenses are, and what teams are profitable or not. How come they don't just open up their books, show the players, show the public, hey, listen, we're not as profitable as you think. We have a ton of expenses, and this is why the players need to take less salary. How come they don't show the books?
Because just historically, private companies, that's not something that they would ever do. And in baseball, they've been very protective of their books. But by the way, the books are open. When the union says that they have no information on teams' finances, they're not being forthcoming because of revenue sharing, which is where teams with lots of local revenue give money into a pool that then gets distributed. It's a little more complicated, but basically gets distributed to teams with lower amounts of local revenue. Those numbers are vetted and audited by independent auditors. The Marlins were audited both. We had an auditor, MLB has an auditor, the union has an auditor, and these are not, schleppy companies. These are, the Price Waterhouse companies of the world, where Ernst & Young, where audits are done and approved. So baseball, the union knew exactly, for example, what the Marlins numbers were. What the union is saying is that there are other businesses, and you heard Scott Boras say this, there are other businesses that team owners own that are profitable. Therefore, the teams have more money to spend. So that's like saying to, and I use Mickey Arison's example a lot because he owns Carnival Cruise Lines, or a lot of shares of stock in that. And just because that stock is worth whatever it's worth, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden he needs to put that money into the Heat, and that the Heat then should run at a loss, and that loss should be paid by the owner who has other revenue sources. So yes, owners own other businesses, or own networks, or own ballpark villages, or own real estate development. Absolutely true. But that just means that they are diverse business owners. And I mean diversity not in terms of color, I mean in terms of assets. And so the question is, and it's a very simple question, when you are a private company, you're under no obligation to show the books to your employees ever. And I draw the attention to you wherever you work. Do you get to see when you're negotiating your salaries? Do you say to your employer, by the way, prove to me that you can't pay me more because I believe that I deserve $50,000 more, and I know you've got it. So show me your books and then pay me that extra money that I know you have. I don't know what fantasy world that is. I've never been an employee and had the right to ask my employer to open his books and say, hey, you owe me more money.
It's an interesting way to think about it, David. David Samson, former Florida Marlins president, now host of Nothing Personal, David Samson on CBS Sports. That was awesome, David. I think that was so informational. Like I said, it really kind of, for a fan perspective, kind of siding with the players in this argument is a great insight into really how the ownership is thinking and how the front office is thinking and why it's, it does take a sacrifice for everyone in this to get baseball back. We really appreciate the time, and hopefully we can talk about baseball being played at some point in 2020. But do appreciate the time. Thanks
Ryan,
so much.
I just want to end, Ryan, by telling you this, that I am not taking the side of just the owners. I think they've done a lot of PR mistakes. I think that the owners and the union should stand up together and have made statements about what's going on with the death of George Floyd. I think that they should get a deal done and get back to playing as quickly and as painfully as it may be and show unity for this country. And I think it's critical, but I just want to inform the listeners of the economic realities that exist because they're real. That's all.
No, and that's great because, like I said, we've only heard it from the player side, and that's why, personally, I've gravitated more there because we know more about, their actual finances. Obviously, we know their salaries, but the owners are a big mystery, and especially, being a billionaire and billionaire owners, it's, again, it's tough to decide. But like I said, this was awesome. This is insight that we never really heard before. So thank you for that, David.
You're welcome, Ryan. My pleasure. Have a great day.